You know, when one talks about Donald Trump, particularly as we remember that the 20th day of January 2026 marks his 1 year in office, it wakes up many things. He became the second president of the United States of America to be elected in non-executive terms since the year 1892 when Grover Cleveland became the 22nd and 24th president of the United States of America. Trump is the 45th and 47th president of the United States of America. He will be in office when America is celebrating 250 years since she regained independence. And these are very important and significant facts because he's the president of the United States of America who comes and says, it is America first. And if you ask him, he's the political reincarnation of President Monroe, hence what he calls Donroe, which is a mix of Monroe and Donald. And that has given birth to what we call Make America Great Again. Those who listen to him keenly and listen to him during the campaign period describe him as the most transparent president that America has ever had. And they are saying he's doing exactly what he said he would do. But in the interpretation of many, that meant that he would be a little bit more inward looking. And in many cases, one may argue that that is what is happening. And let us assess a number of issues. Number one, he started by telling the NATO members that you've been eating free lunch for too long. Pay a little more for your defense. It then increased to 5% expenditure. He told them that there was a beautiful big ocean between Europe and the United States of America. He told them that NATO is an organization that has lost its true value since its creation in 1949, perhaps not in so many words. And you can see what one may call a verbal civil war within NATO. Verbal in the sense that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has said, for the sake of the safety of the Western Hemisphere, we must now take Greenland by hook or crook. And he said, we are going to take it either by force or by acquisition. And it's not lost on me that when he was talking about taking over Greenland, the person that he selected as his pointsman is the governor of Louisiana. And that is a similitude because Louisiana was acquired from the French. And he's saying, in the same manner, we are going to acquire Greenland. And that gives birth to a number of questions. If Denmark is a member of NATO as she is, and if indeed, even as we speak, there is American military presence in Greenland, what is the sudden appetite for acquisition of Greenland? The argument is, if we don't get in, then the Chinese and the Russians will get in. But is that a reason or simply an excuse and a justification for the intended takeover? And that has led, of course, to the shuttle diplomacy between Washington and Copenhagen. The end of it has yet to be seen because we have seen letters being written to NATO members telling them that if you don't acquiesce to this acquisition of Greenland, then we are going to impose tariffs. And you will remember, and all of us will remember, that tariffs is the chosen weapon that has been used by the Trump administration to intimidate at times, to scare at times, and at times to get people to get into the negotiation table. How the Greenland scenario pans out is a matter of speculation. But I have no doubt in my mind that what we'll see is an attempt by the European powers to ensure that there is an arrangement and an agreement that is favorable to the United States of America. Because without the United States of America, Europe is so weak and vulnerable that they cannot afford the luxury of having a United States of America which is hostile to Europe as we know it. You know, when history is written and you ask the experts, it will be said of Donald Trump that he is neurodivergent, to mean that the way he sees and deals with things is not normal or not in keeping with the ordinary trajectory. And that is why when he was asked in matters global, what is the thing that controls you? And he said, it is my morality that defines for me how I deal with the world. And that reminds me of a statement that was made by a French king, King Louis XIV, when he was asked, and what is the state? He said, l'État, c'est moi, I am the state. And Donald Trump is effectively saying, I am the world. Because I'm the world must pander to what I do and say. And you can see this very interesting trait in a number of ways. He tells the world, I'm the one who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. I've stopped 8 wars. But if you check very keenly, those wars, beyond the paper that they have been written on, the stoppage, the wars are alive and well. The conflict is alive and well in Congo. The Russia-Ukraine war is alive and well. Gaza is alive and well. Syria is alive and well. The wars are alive and well, but he's saying, I have stopped them. And then what does he say? I deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, and browbeats the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Maria Machado, to actually hand over the certificate to him, and he receives it. Very unusual. And during that same period, you see a very interesting thing. While this peacemaker, who is also creating a Trump Peace Center in Washington, D.C., during that same period, on the 3rd day of January, he invades Venezuela and literally picks the president of that country and causes him to be delivered in New York and to be tried. And he tells Colombia, if you joke, we'll do the same. And he tells Cuba, if you joke, I'll do the same. This is the peacemaker on one hand, as he claims, and also in many ways a creator of wars. And the desire for recognition is amazing, so that the president of FIFA is compelled to create a special peace prize and to hand over the peace prize to him, and he receives him. So that when one is thinking about Donald Trump, he defies narrow and strict definitions as to how he thinks. He thinks is the Alpha and Omega. He thinks, one may say, he's larger than life, almost as large as death. He thinks that he's the one who ought to direct the world on what the world ought to do. And if you had any doubt, when he was addressing the General Assembly of the United Nations in September of 2025, he said, the United Nations is useless. America must become great again. America operates outside of international law. In his world, Donald J. Trump is the Alpha and Omega. In his world, Donald J. Trump is omnipotent, is omniscient, is infallible. Donald J. Trump, in a manner of speaking and speaking hyperbolically, is the Roman Catholic Pope and the King of England wrapped into one. It is something that I believe the world has not seen, and if it did, it was a long, long time ago. That is Donald J. Trump that we are dealing with during this period, and that is why he thinks that he can solve all the problems of the world. When there is a problem in Gaza, he appoints peace board and appoints heads of state of different countries to be part of that peace board, which he chairs. When there is a conflict about the dam in Ethiopia, he writes to President Sisi and Prime Minister Abiy and says, I'll be the one who is going to solve it. I'll be the one who is going to solve the problems of the Caribbean, the problems of Asia, so that he is this God's gift to the world in his scheme of things, who must be present everywhere because it is him who can control and direct the world. And in that way, then America is great again. And you can see the rhetoric. We have the best military in the world. We went into Iraq and took out their nuclear facilities in a manner that only the United States of America can do. We went into Caracas and took out Maduro in the only way America can do. And if you listen to those who are working under him, they believe that America has the best military in the world, the best economy in the world, the best technology in the world, and everybody is merely playing catch up. Do as America wants or does, or you are done. That is Donald J. Trump. When one talks about the United States of America diplomacy, particularly with regard to Greenland, one is left confused and perplexed at once. Because in 1949, when NATO was established, so soon after the end of the World War, 4 years to be exact after the end of the World War, the existential threat to the Western world as it then was the Soviet Union. And after the World War II, the United States of America had emerged as the hegemon and the leader of what the American politician then described as the leader of the free world. And occupying that position, the United States of America then took the position that it would be the guarantor of peace in the Northern Hemisphere. And quite a number of the Western countries, to include the conceptual West, such as countries like Australia, took the view that America would essentially pay the lion's share of the bill. And that is what has been happening, so that when you look at NATO and when you look at NATO in the context of the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, NATO's value in many ways started to diminish in real terms. Of course, Russia then became the power that inherited what was seen to be the preeminence of the Soviet Union, and China also. But NATO did not have the kind of threat, or so they believed, that they thought they heard immediately after the World War II. And one would have assumed that NATO, having then been this hegemon, and with the collapse of the Warsaw Pact, then they would speak with one voice. And one would have expected that that voice is consistent, it is coherent, it speaks of one message, and if there are any internal wrangles, then the United States would negotiate with the European Union, which houses many of the NATO members. But then Trump came up with something that was completely unexpected, completely unusual. The thing that we now call MAGA, Make America Great Again. And if you look at the underlying philosophy of MAGA, he is simply saying the United States of America has been underwriting the bills of both Europe and the international community for too long. He is actually saying that all international institutions where the Americans had dominance have lost their value, including NATO. And that is why he disparages the United Nations. That is why he says that you Europeans, you must now defend yourself. And that is how America then pulls out of numerous organizations and say, we are not going to participate in these organizations, we are not going to pay, so that NATO is within itself in what permit me to describe as a verbal civil war where trust has been lost. And this trust therefore means that America can only think of things that are in the best interest of America, that America's defense is not one that is to be confused or conflated with the defense of Europe, which is why I think Trump says it is done wrong, kind of revisiting the Monroe Doctrine, which told the European powers, you remain in Europe, we are going to take charge of our hemisphere, and America is going to be the leader of the Western Hemisphere. So when we see this rhetoric about Greenland, they are saying, we don't trust you. We don't think that you have the military wherewithal. We don't even need you. We can't depend on you. We know that Greenland is in your geographical territory, but do we trust you to defend us, to defend our interests? Does that make America great again? America can only be great again if it is in total control of what it thinks it needs and what it wants, and we don't think the European powers can do it, and therefore we cannot let Greenland be under the control of Denmark or the control or the guaranteed control of European powers. We will only feel safe and secure if we, the United States of America, have our own forces in that area. And that depicts Trump as a person who is going into what I do not know whether to call it Pax Americana, because it is not even peaceful, but one, for want of a better term, is saying it is Pax Americana. And Pax Americana means, shut up, all of you. There is only one voice that is worthy of being heard and worthy of being listened to. And that is the United States of America. But it's not even the United States of America. It is the voice of Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump, who is only governed by a sense of morality, as he says. Donald J. Trump, who operates outside of international law, however defined. And therefore, when I want Greenland, I get it. When I want Gaza, I get it. It becomes my Riviera. So you can see an individual who has arrogated to himself the monopoly of power, knowledge, and wisdom. And he believes in this regard he cannot be stopped. Can Europe afford the luxury of confronting him? No. They do not have the nuclear firepower. They do not have the conventional military firepower to dare to confront the United States of America. And as we have said before, there is only one language that is spoken by Donald J. Trump when you don't tangle with him. Drones, tomahawks, ballistic missiles. And if you joke, remember we have a nuclear button. We can decimate you. So it is not just gunboat diplomacy. It is gunboat diplomacy that is also attended to by possibility of military action. And I think the Europeans don't want to get into that state. They may raise the decibels by saying, we will confront the United States of America, but when the road meets the rubber, I think their tails will be between their legs. On the question of Greenland, there are several scenarios, and I want to imagine that when Trump is sitting with these advisors in the Oval Office, these are the scenarios that they build. Scenario number one, and the best case scenario, let them sell Greenland to us. Scenario number two, let them lease Greenland to us for an unlimited period of time. Scenario number three, we enter into a long-term negotiation with them that saves their face, but is essentially a sale of Greenland to the United States of America. Scenario number four, we simply go there with our military. We may not say it is a takeover, but we are there and in effective control. Scenario number five, we simply take it over and see what they can do. So that is, I think, the scenario building that is going to play out and that is playing out, and that ultimately those scenarios, if presented to the government in Copenhagen, they'll be very realistic. They'll now not make reference to the United Kingdom or to France or to Sweden or to Norway. They'll think that the country that loses face is Denmark. And I think when the chips are down, the Danes are going to negotiate. And I think there was a bipartisan meeting that took place in Copenhagen with representatives of the both houses of Congress, and they were saying, we will respect Copenhagen's decision and we'll do that which is in the best interest. We have a saying in my mother tongue that the rat bites you and also blows that which cools you. And I think Americans are doing that. In English, they call it carrot and stick. So they are using both the carrot and the stick. But ultimately, unless Trump makes a total change or takes a total turn, he's going to have Greenland one way or the other. You know, when one looks at the position in European Union now, and also in the context of Russia and in the context of the United States of America, one sees a very interesting scenario, because if you look at how the United States of America under Trump has dealt and is dealing with Europe and the European Union, he is humiliating his partners within NATO. He is talking down at them. He is telling them things that he ought not to tell them. But somehow they accommodate the United States of America, perhaps because of the code that was created since 1949 and the belief that they are some kind of cousins and that there is this blood relationship. And I'm using the word blood very loosely to define the fact that they were on one side in the World War II. As regards Russia, I think there is a history there, because President Putin, despite his firmness, has always left this window that we can negotiate with the European Union. We only want certain guarantees, and those guarantees include, among other things, that you respect us. Number two, that you don't expand to the east, that you don't allow a country in our proximity like Ukraine to be a possible launch pad for weapons that would threaten Russia. And he says, I'm ready to negotiate with Russia. I'm ready to work with you. In any event, we are supplying you with gas. We are in your neighborhood, so you are our geographical neighbors. But that notwithstanding, because of very subtle, sometimes not so subtle, American coercion, the rhetoric against Russia is a lot more rabid. So one does not even understand why you are rabid against somebody who is ready to accommodate you and who is not insulting you. But the other one who is insulting you, you are ready to really kneel and beg. But remember that there is something called the Stockholm Syndrome. Perhaps this is the Stockholm Syndrome that Europe is suffering from, that they have been so much detained and controlled and dominated by United States of America that they have grown to love the oppressor. So I think there is an element of Stockholm Syndrome in the relationship between the European Union and the United States of America, that even in the face of abuse, in the face of humiliation, in the face of intimidation, they still come and say, you have dominated us, you have humiliated us, but you are still our brother. We still love you, love us back. That is the kind of thing that I see in this very unequal relationship. You know, when you look at the relationship between Donald J. Trump and European powers, particularly individuals such as President Macron of France, a few things stand out. Remember that Macron leads a country that was a major colonizer, a country that in the recent past has lost most of her former colonies, lost control in most of her former colonies. In the Sahel region, they have lost out, and its diplomatic significance in the world is reducing by the day. But it is a colonial power that still has hubris. Macron still thinks that this is the France of Napoleon Bonaparte. He thinks that this is the France of Charles de Gaulle. This is not that France. And therefore, when Trump is dealing with France, he sees it as the moon which lost its shine, and one that can't be ignored. And even when Macron says that he's not accepting the invitation of Trump, Trump simply says, but what can you do? You little France, you just lost your colonies the other day. What can you do? When push comes to shove, can you tango? Can you just with the United States of America? You cannot. You are struggling to regain your lost power and your lost territories. You can't. The United States is the United States of America. And you won't be surprised if in a short while you'll see President Macron in the Oval Office delivering a message with Trump next to him, saying how they have discussed and have agreed that the historical ties between France and the United States can never be compromised. There may be little disagreements, but France and the United States are joined at the hip. Who has the last laugh? Trump. You know, whenever I think about and look at the kind of relationship one may describe, for want of a better artistic definition, love-hate relationship between Russia and the United States of America, between Donald Trump and Putin, one wonders, and it defies even the scrutinizing minds and eyes of psychologists. Because one of the things that has emerged is that Trump loves strong people. And Putin is strong. He comes out as strong, he is resolute, he has resolve, he is not easily intimidated, if intimidated at all. And I think that is a side of President Putin that Trump loves. But then there is realpolitik, which tells him that, you see, Russia and the United States of America are in competition. And you are in competition because the United States of America wants to be the hegemon in the whole world. Russia is also not keeping quiet. We see Russia also negotiating for military bases. We see Russian companies entering into different parts of the world. If it is not in Africa, it's in Latin America, it is in Asia, and therefore you are in competition. And I think that his foreign policy advisors are therefore telling him that as far as that is concerned, you cannot give concessions, because if Russia is great, America cannot be great again. So in that context, you can see the conflict and the confusing diplomacy that appears to govern the relationship between the United States of America and Russia. But because he does not want to cut the umbilical cord, if it exists, between Russia and the United States of America, there are many areas of collaboration. In the space, they are still collaborating. In areas where he thinks that Russia should have an interest, he still wants to see them as part of this big mega process in Gaza. So he wants Russia to be present there. But he also is doing that because, in my view, he wants to be seen as the major domo, the dominant power. I'm the one who invites people. Even the great Putin, I'm the one who is inviting him. And therefore, when I invite people, I'm the owner of all that is happening in the world. So one must see this apparently conflicting diplomacy as one that is informed on the one hand by, I think, genuine love and admiration for President Putin, because he cannot be intimidated, but is also dictated by another reality, that if I want America to remember me as the great American president, remember, he says, President Trump, that what I'm doing, no other American president has ever done what I'm doing. I'm the best that America has ever produced and will ever produce. I'm the great one. And in that regard, therefore, he does not want to see people who are equally strong far away from. Perhaps Trump is governed by this saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer. You know, when I study as a student of history, I look at Trump and I look from 1946, this is the real estate born into this space, takes over the family business, grows it, goes into Fordham School, goes into Wharton, goes into the military a short time, avoids the draft, becomes an actor, writes a book about deals, sometimes has this relationship in WWE, in wrestling. So it reminds me of this famous statement that for Donald Trump, as Shakespeare once said, all the world is but a stage. All men and women have their comings and goings. And in that stage, he wants to be the main actor, the dominant actor. And if there is any other actor who is scaring the rest of the world, to use the analogy that has been put forth, I'm the only one who can, in a manner of speaking, get into the lion's den and come out unscathed. I'm the Colossus of Rhodes who can bestride the world, and everybody else and everything else is like small ants. That, I think, is the psychology of Donald Trump as he relates with every other leader in the world. And I think that Donald Trump is particularly intrigued by three leaders in the world. Vladimir Putin of Russia. Number two, President Xi of China. And the president of North Korea. He does not understand them, and they intrigue him, and he doesn't know how to deal with them. But remember, America must be great again. And I think America must be great again must also be read to mean Trump must be great again. You know, when one looks about the arguments being put forth by the United States of America as regards the takeover of Greenland, it gives birth to a number of very dangerous scenarios and possibilities. Perhaps dangerous is not the word, but possibilities. That international relationship is governed by the law of the jungle, and that might is right. That if you have military power, then you cannot be controlled, and that therefore, if you think that your security is threatened, then you can go and grab any country. If the United States of America succeeds with Greenland, the message that they will be sending to other strong military powers in order to secure your interests, both domestically and abroad in the territorial sea and in the high seas, the only thing that you ought to have is military might. The Chinese will say, but our claim for Taiwan is beyond that. It is even a historical claim that it was part of us, that these were renegades, and they'll move in and seize Taiwan. The Russians will say, we cannot afford the luxury of having any threats in our neighborhood. Therefore, we must seize Ukraine, we must seize Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. And India could also argue that Bangladesh is in our neighborhood, we feel threatened, therefore we must take Bangladesh. That argument and that kind of reasoning and approach can only create chaos. And the danger is that those arguments are coming at a time when the institutions that were created after the Second World War, namely the United Nations, is now at its weakest. And that many things are happening without the involvement of the United Nations, and many of its decisions can't be ignored, and its institutions have become weak. The International Court of Justice has issued orders against Israel. They have been ignored. Warrants have been issued by the International Criminal Court. They have been ignored. So the Greenland scenario is creating something, if it will be called a precedent, which if followed by other countries in the league and under the philosophy of the Monroe Doctrine, then the world will go back to the days of colonization, so that strong powers will colonize weaker ones. And this time round, it may not even be actually moving in physically, but just military domination. And the institutions that we see that are still being used to dominate the world, like the IMF, like the World Bank, and of course even the World Trade Organization, are going to be reconfigured to deal with this new scenario that making America great is beginning to create. It is very interesting. Of course, we know that this presidency will only last for the next 3 years, and after that, you never know whether there could be reversal of some of the decisions that are being taken. But if America continues on this trajectory, then the world is receiving very interesting lessons. And I'm sure the Chinese, Beijing is watching very keenly. I'm sure Moscow is watching very keenly. And I'm quite certain that New Delhi is also watching very keenly. The debate must still be undertaken as to whether America is becoming great. Because when you make America great, it means that America ought to be respected. Number one, as a military power. Number two, as an economic power. Number three, as a country that uses its power in a manner that is for the benefit of the weaker countries. Once again, William Shakespeare once said in his play Measure for Measure, how great to have the power of a giant, but it's tyrannous to use it like a giant. One would have thought that a great America makes it safe for small countries around it, makes it safe for Panama, makes it safe for Cuba, makes it safe for the Caribbean countries, make it safe so that we have a big brother or big sister who is looking after us. But look at the manner in which the United States of America is operating now. Even internally, the deployment of the military in different parts of the United States of America, in Minnesota and other parts, tells you that even within the domestic arena, there are internal contradictions. That tells you that America is eating itself even from inside. And when you go outside and you see demonstrations in the streets of Copenhagen, in the streets of London, in Germany and other places saying that Americans, MAGA means make America go away, then it tells you that there is something that is happening which is outside of the Trumpian script, and that the time is now for them to reflect. And one shudders to imagine if you had leaders who were as self-absorbed as Trump, so that they are able to say, we are going to do what we are going to do regardless. If President Putin were to behave in the same way, if President Xi were to behave in the same way, if President Lula were to behave in the same way, then you would very easily find yourself in a third world war. That is why you can see that what President Trump is doing is also possible because the other world leaders, to mean the leaders of the militarily strong countries, are very restrained. China keeps on repeating that our military is for defense. They keep on repeating that our nuclear is for defense. In other words, they are sending a clear message that we are prepared to play according to international rules. The same thing from Putin is simply saying the reason why I'm in Ukraine is because in 1990 you say not 1 inch more. Conversely, the President of the United States of America is saying that when I'm dealing with global matters, the only thing that determines or stops me is my own morality, and that where I operate, there is no international law, and if there is, it does not matter. Suppose everybody were to use the same rhetoric and to use the same approach, then it would be a dangerous scenario. And you've seen that rhetoric is the kind of rhetoric that has now put the Middle East and the Persian Gulf on tenterhooks, so that there is almost military mobilization in that area. And I'm sure that ballistic and other warheads are at the ready, only waiting to be switched on, because there is that Make America Great Again approach, which means nobody matters except the United States of America. When I listen to Trump, the 45th, and how he talks about Joe Biden, he only thinks that Biden, the 46th, was a rude interruption, and that the 45th is an overpass or underpass or a smooth segue, if you may, into the 47th. So that is a continuation of what he had started. And in his mind, therefore, we are going to continue on this trajectory. And that is why he says this is what was on our campaign platform. This is
This is the journey to One Africa.